Salutations. And welcome back to my channel. My name is Kadology and I make videos about everything and anything to do with modern society. So a few days ago, I uploaded a video, and this video caused a bit of contention in the comment section for various reasons. One of which was a disclaimer which I presented at the beginning of this video. In this disclaimer, I made it clear that I was apolitical.
Life could be worse. No, not really. This is the worst.
This is the worst.
This is the worst.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Anyway.
So let us first do what I do in every single video and love to do, which is definitions. Apoliticism is apathy or antipathy toward all political affiliations. A person may be described as apolitical if they are not interested or uninvolved in politics. Being apolitical can also refer to situations in which people take an unbiased position in regard to political matters. The Collins English Dictionary defines apolitical as politically neutral, without political attitudes, content, or bias. Now, us who are apolitical get a lot of criticism, particularly with regards to this idea that we are privileged, that we are rich, that we are ignorant, that we choose to ignore the world around us because we are in a situation in which we are allowed to. God, I talk as if we're like a group of oppressed people.
Death to all of them.
I was getting a lot of criticism in the comment section, a lot of comments telling me that I need to choose between one or the other, that I'm right-wing, that I'm just conservative, that I'm just ignorant, all these sorts of things, these lovely things. I was curious as to where all of this certainty that I was either political but just ignorant of my political affiliation or a closeted right-winger came from, because I couldn't really find any notable sources in your traditional media that this was really something that people cared too much about. But apparently I was wrong, and often when I am wrong or when I cannot find what is causing all the hype around me, I know exactly where it comes from. TikTok. So I did the one thing that I vowed I would never do again, but alas, here we are, which is download or re-download TikTok. And this was quite a terrifying experience for me. It's a domain that I do not understand, that I do not wish to understand, and that I have absolutely no interest in pursuing from this point onwards. And downloading it just made me realize that inevitably I am probably going to download TikTok again for another video. And as soon as I downloaded TikTok and saw what people were saying with regards to people who claim to not care about politics or claim to be apolitical, it all started to make sense to me. It was something that just made me think a bit. And so I thought that in order to maybe elaborate a bit more intently and purposefully with regards to my personal apoliticism, I would react to TikToks that call out individuals in general who make claims such as myself. For instance, I don't care about politics, I'm not interested in politics, those sorts of things, in order to maybe provide a little bit of much needed nuance surrounding the multifaceted nature of individuals who claim to not be actively or even inactively political.
Hi, my name is Renee and I'm here to educate you on why we shouldn't normalize being apolitical. So first of all, being apolitical means you have no interest in politics. You don't care about the people suffering, dying, whatever. You just care about yourself. And if that still doesn't bother you, then let me further elaborate. Your silence reeks of privilege because you prefer things the way they are. It doesn't affect you negatively, right? So I suggest you to open your eyes. If your 17-year-old son was brutally murdered by the police, would you still choose to be silent?
Oh, okay. Firstly, I absolutely love your eyeliner. That's incredible detail. It takes me at least 5 minutes per eye to even so much as get a little flick. So congratulations on that. That's admirable.
You always have to say something nice before you go back in.
Firstly, I'd like to address this idea that in being apolitical, we are not interested in politics, that we don't stay informed. I read almost every single weekly, daily newspaper, news outlet, source of information that I can get my hands on. I'm very much up to date with what is going on in the world, with what is going on in my country.
Such as in South Africa and the Iraq, everywhere such as, and so we will be able to build up our future.
I find politics and I find sort of being aware of current events important. For me personally, I find it important and I find it interesting. I hardly ever talk about it to anyone because the people who I do associate with in my immediate life are not interested in politics and don't care about politics. And that's okay because we talk about other things like farting. I wouldn't necessarily equate being apolitical to thus being uninformed and not caring, because I do care in the same way that when I read a book, I care about what I'm reading about, inevitably, otherwise I wouldn't read. So I think that claim is quite disingenuous in and of itself. I think what I appreciate is that when I do read the news and I read about what is going on in the world and the atrocities going on in the world, that it is so complex and so nuanced and so steeped in occurrences and decisions that have been made for centuries to get to this point that I cannot even remotely comprehend. Appreciating that means that I necessarily have to take a step back when I do engage with what is going on in the world. When I read the news, I appreciate that I, as an insignificant individual who very much prioritizes her individualism over that of any collective identity, do not have the power or the means to do anything. And one of the reasons why is because, firstly, I prioritize individualism over everything and anything else. Whether that is because I am selfish, whether that is because of my upbringing, whether that is because of the context in which I live, in a very individualistic Western European context, I do not know, and quite frankly, I do not care. I don't necessarily equate any moralistic connotations to being selfish or being self-absorbed exactly. I think it is just an inevitable attribute of mere survival. And because I place so much significance on individualism, I find it personally quite strange and very foreign to even comprehend and think with so much emotion about strangers, about a world of 7+ billion people whom I do not know, whom I will never interact with, who quite frankly do not care about me and are just trying to survive. And yes, it would be wonderful if everybody could have fair access to better, improved means of survival. I do not see this as being the answer to trying to make that a viable reality for more and more people. And I don't see politics as it is now, in which it is very much collective groups against collective groups, being a means of in any way getting beyond these groups, merely cementing a sense of purpose and identity for themselves in the here and now. It's all about the feeling, oftentimes the sanctimonious or self-righteous feeling. And I understand that. I can understand that, because I think one reason why I'm apolitical is because I am personally very inclined to follow Weber's advice, the sociologist Max Weber, who wrote not extensively, but I think most memorably for me, about the idea of putting yourself in somebody else's shoes, seeing the world from their perspective, and in that, not necessarily being unbiased or not necessarily being neutral, but being understanding of why certain people think and look at the world the way they do. I think it's important to appreciate when looking at history, but more importantly, looking at the here and now, that our particular socialization and our particular moralistic inclinations would most likely be very different if we just went back a mere 50 years. Imagine if we went back 200 years. None of us would have the level of education, the access to information which we have now, which very much influences how we think and how we see the world and how we see ourselves. And I don't think we appreciate that enough. We don't appreciate how actually we are not sanctimonious human rights advocates because we are better people. We are this way because of the world around us, which has given us very unique and exceptional access to information, to ideas, to the globe at large. I mean, even TikTok itself. I mean, TikTok is responsible for creating the identities of many a young Gen Zer, I'm quite sure. And that's brilliant and that's great and it's a beautiful thing and it's a fascinating thing to see. But I think there needs to be an appreciation more so that we are not just individual, self-determining agents. We are also simultaneously, and sometimes even to more of an extent than we'd like to admit, determined actors. A lot of this has to do with like groupthink. A lot of it has to do with, I think, just finding a place in this world and finding identity, and also just looking at the world and all of the outrageous chaos and injustices of it. And I think people just have different responses to that. My response to reading the news is that I actually am not interested in politics, in being a part of politics at all. I'm merely interested in analysing the world, its history, its present, and making my own assumptions and interpretations of its potential future. That's what I do with the information that I have access to and that I enjoy reading and finding out about. And other people have a completely different response, and that's okay. I am personally not in agreement with what this individual is saying, but lovely eyeliner, really.
But how can you not want to get involved in politics when everything is actually political? People are starving, people are getting killed because of politics, and still you don't care?
Again, this inference that being apolitical is not caring is very disingenuous, incredibly disingenuous. And I do have a problem with this sentiment because it's very black and white and it's very binary, which is interesting because I feel that a lot of this argument comes from a very progressive position, which is the position that is meant to be quite anti-binary, anti-black and white, anti just painting the whole canvas one color. This notion of not caring is tricky because I am a human being, and as a human being I appreciate that I'm a thinking thing, but I'm also an embodied thing, and therefore my actions, my life, in fact my very mortality is determined by my biology. And again, I think we give a bit too much credit to the alleged potential of our mental capabilities. I think, yes, you can educate yourself, but I don't think that undermines the fact that if you were put into a situation in which the individual person who you love the most in the world, who's the most important human being and thing to you ever, was put in front of you alongside a group of starving individuals from the most impoverished communities in the world, and you were told to pick one, either the one individual who you love irrationally, emotionally, passionately, who is your world, who you fight with and bicker with every day, and a group of individuals whom you've never met before but who are starving, who are victims, well and truly victims of a horrible and harsh world. I really do not feel that the majority of people would choose the latter, and that is okay. In fact, that's normal. It's perfectly normal. It is completely normal to understand the world from the perspective of yourself and from the perspective of that very small insular group of people whom you know on a personal level. I think a lot of my ideas about being apolitical or not affiliating with either side or any sort of aspect of the political spectrum derives from the writings of Hannah Arendt, whom, if you've been on this channel for a while, you'll know I have very high regard for. And Hannah Arendt really got me thinking about this in a way that I hadn't, because based on all of her writings, you would assume that she is a very political person. Nay, I say. And she wrote the following in her Jewish writings. writings, a collection of Jewish writings, which I would highly recommend anybody reads because it's truly important and fascinating stuff. I have never in my life loved any people or collective, neither the German people, nor the French, nor the American, nor the working class, or anything of that sort. I indeed love only my friends, and the only kind of love I know of and believe in is the love of persons. And I couldn't agree more. I do not love any group. I do not love South Africa. I do not love black people. I do not love white people. I do not love bisexual people. I do not love any group of people. And I never will, at least at this point in my life, I believe that I never will. I only love persons. I love probably a handful of people. That's what I care about more than anything. That's the most important thing to me. Does that make me selfish? Of course it makes me selfish. Does it make me happy? Yes, it does. Does it matter? No, it doesn't matter to anyone except myself and the person involved. That's important, I think. I think it's important to appreciate that we can only love persons. Trying to branch out into loving humanity, trying to fix the injustices of the world via these very sweeping, very, I would even say naive claims about what being this or being that is. I think it doesn't get anywhere. And as I said, I think it's more so about finding meaning in ideas and trying to understand one's own place in the world through something bigger than oneself, which sort of gives it a credibility that individualism doesn't give. I think that is the problem of individualism, in that it is very scary because there's no group of people affirming you. There's no group of people telling you that you are on the right path, that this is the truth of the matter. There's no collective purpose, which we need in unison with other people. It's very, very lonely, and it of course has many disadvantages, but it is all that I have, and it is what I believe. That's actually quite brilliant. Jolly good. Yeah. I respect the memeability of that. Yes.
I'm not even sure he's on the top 5 of the all-time greatest Lakers, bro.
That's not ridiculous. That's not ridiculous to say that.
This is another thing for me that I have an issue with. My issue lies in this claim that you cannot be friends or form relationships with individuals who hold different political and moral views to you. If I had lived by that, I would have missed out on so many relationships that mean the absolute world to me. I mean, for instance, I'm very, very good friends with a woman who is, I guess in terms, she's homophobic. You know, I don't think she would have shed too many tears when Sodom burned to the ground. It's tricky because I do find myself in situations where it's a bit awkward because, I mean, if she knew the things that I'd done with women,
She'll get over that.
But the thing is that I love her and she is a lovely person. She means the world to me and we have a very positive, very good relationship. Sexuality doesn't really come into it. It's difficult because I think we hold so many different views about the world and about our place in it, and we still somehow make it work. Like somehow I still adore her. I feel that it's more so a fact of her not understanding rather than her not being able to overlook the fact that I may not be the good little Christian girl that I may appear to be. And it's odd because this woman is also somebody who in the sort of social justice sphere of things would be, based on her personal identity, considered one of the most oppressed people in the world, quite frankly. And it's just interesting how it's so easy to then turn against somebody such as her because she holds quite strong views about sexuality, about marriage, about men and women. But I enjoy the fact that I am friends with people and that I have formed relationships with people who hold very different views to me and very different morals to me. I think it's just a matter for me of putting myself into their shoes, which is what I always try to do. I've tried to put myself into the shoes of this particular woman and knowing where she grew up knowing what she's been through, knowing how she inevitably sees the world, I can understand her stance. And the reason why I can personally respect that is because I'm quite certain that if she were to find out what I do in the dark,
I can only be who I am. Excuse me.
that she would not then burn me at the stake or say that I had no reason to exist or end our friendship. Yes, things might be awkward, and I guess my faith in our friendship and my faith in her as a person, at least on my end, I'm quite willing to carry on with such a friendship. And I would hope, and I am under the impression and belief that based on the years of friendship that we have shared, that that would be okay for her. And I would hope that it would be. I don't think politics or any collective identity or thought should ever get in the way of persons loving a person. I think the only times that I would ever have a problem with that is if I felt that their view in their eyes justified them causing harm. And I don't consider my feelings being hurt being harm. I think that's quite important. I can object to it. I can get upset. I can demand recognition and an apology, but I do not call that a violation of my personhood insofar as human rights are concerned. Feelings are just so unpredictable and are just so specific to each and every individual. And I was talking about this to my patrons a little while ago about the N-word, for instance. If somebody were to call me the N-word, I would not personally get offended. It personally wouldn't mean anything to me because, I don't have a soul. But to many people, that most certainly would, and rightly so. But that just shows how different people approach things. It just shows how different that feeling is, even based on who's calling you the N-word, will matter and will determine how you feel after being called that, potentially. So I think it's very difficult, if not impossible, to base any moral argument on the feelings that it will induce. I'm quite happy to make friends with people who hold very different views to me, who are of different beliefs, different moral positions on things, as long as we can agree that after we've discussed, debated, and disagreed about how we are going to allegedly fix the world and make it a better place based in all of our different images, we can then just take a step back, go back into our personal world and lives and love each other in our personal, friend-oriented way, because life is just too short to be getting upset, to be getting ill over how strangers make one feel. There's just too little time. I'm not really into politics because they don't affect me. I think it depends on context. I think if I were living not in the context that I currently live, I would definitely feel potentially that I was obligated to be political, or I'd feel like there was a need for me to be political if it did directly or more overtly and directly affect me, which it doesn't. I live in a very small, isolated community in England, and politics is just quite go with the flow here. This could relate to voting. I do vote, not because I want to or because I care at all. Wherever I have lived, in whichever county in the UK that I've lived, I always just vote with what the majority goes for, whether that be the Conservatives, Labour, or the Liberal Democrats. And if I do not know what is going on, which sometimes does happen, and I'm just passing a polling station place, I'll just vote for the independent because I don't know. I really don't know. And I really don't care. I haven't lived in any swing counties or anything like that, so it hasn't really featured. The only reason I do vote actually is because I do it more so out of my respect for women's suffrage in the United Kingdom. My main point of admiration was in finding out and reading about how the suffragettes put on hold their demands, their struggle for suffrage when the war broke out. And I think that was a very selfless and a very admirable thing to do, irrespective of what I personally think about war or the war, what I think about what they did. I think my perspective on what they did has more to do with that ability to see something and determine that actually in this particular time and context, this may be more important than this, and to put on hold and to sacrifice your interests for that of something greater that most definitely didn't have anything to do with advancing women's rights. I think it was an admirable and good thing to do. And I don't know if I would have done it, but I can look at it and I can see something that I really do respect. And I respect everything that they went through, from sacrificing their own lives, their own interests, their own even personal morals, their own families in order to do this thing. And I think that is admirable, and that is definitely a very political thing that they did. And so I think I vote because I do respect that, and I am very grateful to have that right now that I live in England, that I can vote because the suffragettes and their legacy, and I think it is an important one. So that's the only reason I vote. I don't vote because I actually care, and not because I actually think it does anything at all. You've hit the nail on the head. I don't care about anybody but myself and the people who immediately affect my life and who I love and know as individuals. So yes, I don't care about anybody. Thank you very much. I do like your sunglasses. I do like your rings. I really do like your rings. I would like those rings, very much so. Those are stunning rings. This is an interesting one because I have some thoughts on this, because I think that this word privileged is also thrown out haphazardly just to taint anyone. I think in certain respects, yes, I am very privileged, of course. But I don't think that's a bad thing. I don't know why privileged is used as like sort of a haha, gotcha sort of moment, because I don't see that. I mean, if we're going to go to this level of petty, let's go all the way down. Let's go to the very eye of the storm in this. You are the consequence of privilege. You were the privileged sperm that made it. That is privilege. That has nothing to do with socialization, has nothing to do with politics or anything. That is pure and simple privilege. Pure privilege. I mean, in essence, it's biology, but privilege.
Death to all of them.
But yes, on a serious note, in so many ways, I'm so privileged. Like, I was thinking last night, I was actually walking. I just go for walks, and I can go for walks at whatever time I want, quite frankly, because it is so safe where I live, like unbelievably safe. It's incredible, and I love it. It's just the most incredible feeling, because back in South Africa, I would not have dreamed of even stepping a foot out, even during the day where I lived. It was the complete antithesis of where I live now. And this sense of safety that I have is incredible. Like, I was out, it was about like 2 o'clock in the morning. I was just going for like a walk, a bit of a run, and I was listening to a historical program all about Jack the Ripper, and I didn't feel a thing. Now that's privilege. That's real privilege. There's just so many layers and so many complexities to privilege and to what it means and to how it's interpreted and in what context and in who you are communicating with or who you're not communicating with that determines whether you're privileged. I mean, in the course of one day, I can go from one extreme of privileged to another. That's just the fact of life. It's not as simple as just dividing people into privileged and not privileged. The person who means the absolute world to me and is like the apple of my eye, they are not in any way interested in politics. But this person is in no way privileged. This person is very clearly a working class British individual. I would in no way call them privileged. But apparently them saying that they're not interested in politics, that they don't care about politics, them not watching the news, reading a newspaper, getting engaged or educated about anything. I mean, I don't think this person even knows what LGBTQ plus means. So, apparently this person is completely like, a goner, like just irrelevant. But, you know, I absolutely adore and love this person, so it's fine. I think it's just so incredibly oversimplified, and in and of itself is such a privileged position to take, to be able to just see the world and take what every person says based on their entire personal life history, what they've seen of the world, what they've experienced, and to claim and just reduce it, to just dehydrate it to the mere notion that they are just privileged. But remember what I said, you, by mere fact of being here, are privileged because you are the consequence of one sperm beating all the rest. Privilege. I'm a lot more interested in politics insofar as analysing it. I don't look to be the prime mover of it or to be a mover of it. There are definitely people who can do that and who are doing that, and I wish them all the best in their endeavours. And I definitely am not a sympathiser. I don't sympathise with causes. I don't sympathise with ideologies. I do sympathise with individuals. I do sympathise with people, especially if they are caught up in such things. Yes, that's all I can really offer. Thank you so much for watching this and getting through this with me. If you still believe that I am rich, privileged, that I'm ignorant, that I need to educate myself, whatnot, that's perfectly fine. Do continue to share your hopefully thoughtful and hopefully also respectful comments and feedbacks in the comment section down below. I find it very fascinating reading what you have to say, and I love engaging with you. What can I say? I do apologise for my absence, especially on other platforms. A few weeks ago, my landlord announced that they'd sold the house. So it's odd because everybody is moving out of the house or has moved out already. I'm one of the last few remaining, and I'm going to have to move. And once I have moved and settled, everything will be back to normal and I will be able to dedicate a lot more time to the channel. I really do hope that you will be along for the journey because I can't do it without you, each and every one of you, as autonomous individuals. Thank you so much for watching. I do appreciate your time and your patience and for giving me the time of day, and I will see you very, very soon in the next one.